So I appreciate Cody for putting this table together and everybody's being here today for this discussion.
Thank you for that, Enrico. Awesome to have you. Say, Brad, how about tell us a little perspective from Fort Collins' view?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Brad Smith. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the Energy Code Specialist with the City of Fort Collins. I do see we have Rich Anderson, our Chief Building Official here, so I'm glad to have him on the call as well. I think, my role with the city more or less is really a resource to the entire building community within the city, and that includes building department staff, plan reviewers, building inspectors, and then also working with the utility staff, and then also all other stakeholders within the building community, all the way down from developers to builders to trades, contractors, all of that. So I think for this workshop specifically, I think it's good to kind of get this information in front of everybody, because I know specifically in Fort Collins, we are learning a little bit more and more about what the future looks like in the city, and that's definitely moving in the direction of performance-based codes. I would consider Passive House some level of performance-based code. We're determining the performance of this building as it relates to the comfort, energy use, greenhouse gas emissions, and all of that stuff. And all of those things we're looking to improve within the city of Fort Collins. So I think this is important. I think it's something that we will probably explore in the future of our code body a little ways into the future. So I think this is good timing, especially coming into a 2021 code year. So thanks.
Thank you, Brad. Appreciate it. Very good background. And so is Juan on, or Eric? Should we let you do it?
Well, I can say something, but Juan, Alan, are you guys able to hear audio and speak at this point?
Yeah, we've got audio and microphones.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'll just introduce real quickly and turn it over to Juan. But I'm the Chief Building Official for Larimer County. Been here about 8 years. And basically the problem we come up with is when we look at the IRC Chapter 14, the code language is heating and cooling equipment and appliances shall be sized in accordance with ACA Manual S or other approved sizing methodologies based on building loads calculated in accordance with ACA Manual J or other approved heating and cooling methodologies. And when it says other approved means acceptable to the jurisdiction having authority. So, the ACA Manual J is kind of the prescriptive code. If something is, approved by ACA, we know it meets the standard. Passive house modeling, while it's very, it's very detailed, and I understand it may be better or more detailed than ACA, it's not ACA approved. So therefore it has to be other approved. So to code officials like me and the others on, we need to be assured that it has at least the same capacity, follows similar or better methodology as ACA, and also that in the end it's going to produce a simple guide for our inspectors. We don't want the inspectors having to paw through pages and pages and pages of calculations to find out what the furnace size and the air conditioner size and the insulation is. So we're not against certainly Passive House. I know it's a very good product. It's very tight, but we have codes we have to follow, and so you have to convince us to approve it. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And then I'll let Juan introduce himself.
Yeah,
Thank you.
on the plan examiner, Larimer County. You probably can't see me, but there you go. Yeah, we have a checklist. Actually, Alan's the one that wrote it up, and I haven't seen any of this modeling yet. I don't know if Alan has. I don't know if Chris has, but
Greg Fisher and Enrico, we worked together on his place, and he provided the model. So you have seen it once.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, when Eric came to us, the problem is, as like Eric said earlier, we don't want our inspectors, they don't have the time to go through a packet of this modeling and try to figure out what the R values, walls, ceilings, floor. I mean, we were talking about if Eric did approve something like this, that there's like a summary page. So our inspectors go out there and they can go verify everything out in the field. But on our end, I mean, we have more time to look at this information. But I mean, like Eric said, right now this isn't ACK approved. So, I mean, we have our checklist. I actually sent this over to Cody yesterday, and this is what we're looking for. If Eric would approve something in other jurisdictions, and however they're reviewing this stuff, I mean, as long as this information on our checklist is on there, we can do a thorough review and get it out to our inspectors. I'm sure it's going to help the contractors as well. If there's a central page on all information on there, they can just look on there. Oh yeah, this is what we need to have, R23 or something in there. They're not going through a big old packet and then there's potential of not putting the right information, the right product in there.
So is it safe to say that we would like to hear maybe from Lisa and Enrico on why they use that software, why they think it should be approved? Or should we look at, Juan, maybe what county's looking at and then allow Lisa and Enrico to say, we can produce that?
I mean, we can. I mean, I even reached out to Gil and I see him there in his thoughts. I see him on there as well because he's seen some of this stuff before as well. So, I mean, I see Gil. I mean, we can go over kind of our checklist and see if it's on there. I mean, absolutely. But I mean, this is just for Larimer County. I don't know, see for Collins, what do you guys do? What's your checklist? I mean, I know you're a little bit, my understanding is a little more stringent when it comes to the requirements for energy code stuff compared to the county.
So if I can steal the microphone for 1 second, then just to place some order, I've got Gil, I've got you unmuted if you'd like to join in. And specifically, we're going to address what counties are looking for. We've got Fort Collins then and Parker and then Larimer County specifically. Go ahead, Brad.
Well, I was just going to say I'd be curious as to how Larimer County and anybody else, and I know we've got some people on here, certainly Gil, Hope, and some others that do address this. But really, let's look at like a performance path and a projected report and maybe a detailed summary out of a Right Software and Elite report as well. How does that stuff reconcile with the plans, and how is that transferable to the field as well? So I know in the city of Fort Collins, one of the things that we do is we do stamp on there that if it is a performance path, that they must meet the requirements of that path and refer to the document for, let's say, installation component details. So I think we'd be looking for something very similar with Passive House or WWOOFie reporting. We need to, at a minimum, see the details, some sort of building component summary detail sheet, so that we can make sure that all of those documents, all the way from mechanical design to plans to this modeling, all reconcile and are all the same. That is something that we, I think we do a pretty good job of that in the city. So, but feel free to let anybody else chime in. That's always a thing that I think people struggle with. So, how do you reconcile all of those documents?
That standardization kind of thing, I think we're all here in the Passive House side to make it easier. Thank you for that, Brad. Gil, do you have anything you want to jump on there?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I'll jump in. You bet. So I have no authority in Parker or any place. I'm not the boss of anyone anymore, unfortunately. I'd love to be able to tell you all this is what we're doing and let's move on, right? So to me, Passive House is a super prescriptive house. Why would we need to do anything else? Simple to pass prescriptively. You meet pretty much everything, 30 or 40 times over. I think that they're right. You need to do some sort of a summary. Things say, hey, here are the R values of my walls, my ceiling, I'm doing slab on grade, right? The whole deal. And all your installation, all your air barrier stuff is, like I say, 100 times better than what the code can even contemplate at this point. As far as the heat gain and heat loss calculations go, Manual J is not met for passive design in any way, shape, or form. Okay, although Passive House it doesn't have a great big concrete wall that's a great big heat sink, right? But it does have a lot of thermal capacity. Okay, and so one thing that Manual J does not do, and is very proud of saying, that it ignores solar heat gain for heating and anything that's going on inside the house as far as heat. So people, everything. Okay, so it's just not equipped. It's not equipped to do it. So this is some place where I think that, not that I've seen a lot of these submittals, but in the research that I've done here in the last few years, it's definitely different. Instead of just total heat gain for the worst possible point, which is basically night in the middle of the winter for Manual J, these things are doing it on a couple of different methods and starting to subtract the fact that we've got this, quote, thermal mass inside the house, which is furniture, rugs, and floors, and walls, and people. And Manual J doesn't do that at all. So it's unfortunate. I emailed Wes Davis and said, hey, Wes, we're having this thing. What do you think? Well, Wes Davis is with ACA, okay, and does the, one of the guys there that I know, and said, hey, we're going to be talking about this. And I'm pretty much thinking Manual J can't be used for this stuff. What do you think? Well, I'm thinking not, because I didn't get a response, but.
Yeah. Sometimes they don't want to play the argument. Hey, Gil, those are awesome comments. I see Rich Anderson wants to chime in. I'd like to give him a speak too. Thank you so much.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for inviting me to this conversation. It's always nice when we can put our heads together and come up with something that works for everyone. So, Eric, thanks for taking the initiative to reach out to include all of us in this conversation. I'd like to build on some stuff that's already been addressed, and maybe give this group a little bit of my background too, so they know where I'm coming from. I recently came to Fort Collins from Texas. Prior to what I call moving over to the dark side in the inspection world, I was actually a plumbing and mechanical contractor for years in Texas. All right. So those are my core traits. All right. And I don't know if anybody else, I'm looking around the room, there may be a couple of other gray people in this room who remember doing Manual J longhand, because that's the way I was taught. Okay. And yes, municipalities that I used to have to turn that into would want a summary page. So I could see this, that summary page being a benefit. The other thing is that where Eric was talking about as approved as a building official, I see this in two ways. We're designing above code minimum, right? So you're already meeting the minimum code standards. We just need a path to approve your design method. And for me, that takes me to R104.11, okay? Which is alternative materials, design, and methods of construction and equipment, right? Where you guys present to the municipality your design plan, what you are, how you're meeting the minimum of code and not lessening any of the life safety, fire safety things that we can approve. And then based on that, we can have some conversations back and forth on what we need you to submit to us based on that approval. And, I have a process for that here in Fort Collins. We've created a form. We've created a submittal process for all that. Currently, right now, we don't charge any additional fee for that work, but we use the same form for a modification request as an alternative materials and design method. So some things are job specific, would be a modification. I would see this as an alternative design method where if we were to approve it in Fort Collins, it would be a blanket approval for all projects moving forward based on the criteria you submit to us, and then that communication and that agreement on what we need from you. Brad, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that covered it pretty well. So, I do have a question. You're saying the modification request form would be something that you would want to see, we would want to see in the city of Fort Collins if they were to submit as a passive house for?
Well, that's if they did not want to do the Manual J DNS also, because then we would need that approval and that would document and give that, and I can't think of the word I'm looking for. It would basically, I don't know how to say it, but it would document that approval moving forward. And we would have that permanently. And then everybody's expectations would be in writing, right? We would have Cody's expectations on what he thought he could give us, and then, you know, on what we would accept. And then we could go back and forth on, you know, coming to a common ground so that we can review things quickly. To the county's point, you know, it's hard to go through these documents and pull out those little things. So if we did have that summary sheet, I think that would be part of my approval process.
Very well. Now, so that was well-rounded. Thanks for giving that overview. Lisa or Enrico, do you want to add anything from what you're seeing on your side?
Sure. I did have a chance to look at the checklist that was sent out, so thank you for that. And I think that it gets a little technical, but a brief summary is just like a lot of it. We have to make sure our design temperatures that we're designing towards are accurate. We have to make sure the climate data is, you can see what elevation we're working with and what those outdoor temperatures range from. So a lot of that input on what the design is based on, all of that is part of this checklist for us too. So I think I was able to kind of see some alignment in that respect. The manual J, I think the heat load calculation part is what we definitely have covered, and we want to be able to, the summary page is like not a problem in that respect. I've normally just said, you know, heat load calculations are on page 7, and it just, I know that gets too much too. So the other thing I was going to say is when it comes to manual S's, that's when I think we are trying to do something new. We're able to work with like smaller size equipment and heat pumps. And so it is a little convoluted on the manual S side for sure. And that's where we want to be able to prove to you that we've taken altitude reductions into account and efficiencies and of that nature.
So Lisa, in that instance, I would say that the PHPP and the WFI passive are looking at levels more accurate. And that kind of stems from the root of this conversation too, is here we are as building scientists. I got involved with Passive House to predict real usage. So for me, it's been a tool to get to accuracy and net zero. And so we sometimes get larger loads if we go with an alternate software. So that's kind of the keys for me. And I don't want to tailor the conversation, but sometimes when we have been asked to provide those data sets through manuals, they could be 10 to 15,000 BTUs off. And that's a lot of like rule of thumb sizing. So maybe some contractors aren't taking the time to really hone in on what that data set's doing. Enrico, do you have anything you want to jump in on that?
Yes, definitely. We're looking at buildings that are much more decoupled from the external environment than code compliant building. And this makes them a lot more resilient with regards to external changes, including drops, peak temperatures. So the design reference temperatures that we come across in manual J calculation versus PHPP calculation are significantly different in terms of from a few degrees to several degrees difference, with a significant difference in the expected peak heating load. Now, there is an established body of knowledge as far as how these buildings perform once the power goes out. So there's quite a bit of reassurance from that point of view. And then we can dive into the rabbit hole of what kind of data we are entering in either of the software, because that's a very deep rabbit hole to look into. In our training, we assemble telephone booth size boxes that are insulated to the passive house level, as well as to the, we have one that is insulated according to the 2018 IECC code. And we test the thermal resiliency every time we do a workshop, when we can see that after 12 hours of power being out, the passive building remains some 15, 20 degrees warmer than the code-built one. So we have proof of concept. That being said, I spent a lot of time diving deep into how different standards and softwares are put together. The closer you get to zero energy consumption, the more everything matters. And so I like PHPP because it allows you to tweak different parameters versus more code compliant software that are kind of standardized and simplified. And so if you really want to push the envelope, you get a limited number of options as far as air tightness and things like heat recovery ventilation, moisture recovery ventilation, that when you get very close to zero energy consumption, do wait quite a bit. And so I think PHPP represents a much more accurate tool to deliver that kind of performance.
And if I could just interject real quick, that was brilliantly said. So thank you for jumping in there, Enrico. And you definitely have an amazing class. I'd like to give you props there for really bringing the argument of Passive House forefront and training. It's amazing. You know, we call it drinking the Kool-Aid when you go out and take one of these Passive House classes, because indeed, most of the time when you take these classes, you either are going to live in one, you're going to help design them. But what I wanted to bring up is kind of like a warning, because the PHPP and Woofy passive software would be specific to this type of building. So if I was a code inspector and I received a set of plans on my desk that were 2x6 modeled in Woofy passive or PHPP, that would be a flag for me as a code official to say, actually, these are not designed principles for this type of model. And that would be your over insulated, your super airtight, your thermally broken bridge wise. And that gets us the accuracy of where we're at. If you're not a passive house building, then indeed the Manual J and the ACCA approved softwares would be a better fit. Again, the PHPP and Woofy passive would not be a model that you would want to accept on a average built or a code built building, because it's too different: air tightness, insulation, and thermal bridge wise.
If I can, I think, yeah, that's a very good explanation. If I can pass an analogy, we are looking at two sharp knives. One is a chef knife used in a high grade kitchen, and that is Manual J. And the other one is a surgeon knife used in the operative room of an hospital. Very good knives, both of them, but clearly you don't want to use a kitchen knife in a surgery or a surgeon knife in a kitchen. That's the analogy that I bring to the table.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I think that's why probably, you know, it's a larger opportunity for us as Colorado as whole to look at these passive house models, as maybe our legislation wants to see buildings healthier, more comfortable, and lose less energy. This opens the door to more people making better buildings through this software. So well said. Anybody on the code side?
Yeah, my name is Alan Key. I'm with Larimer County Plans Examiner. I think one of the points that we're looking at is on these passive homes, you are very specific on your details to be able to make this system work. Your thermal bridging, all of that has to be looked at specifically. So if you guys aren't bringing in your own passive inspector into this, we're being required to do this inspection. So that's why we're asking for this level of detail. You know, on a Manual J, you know, Mike Mesmer and I have worked a lot on projects together. He's trained me to the point where I can open up a Manual J. I can tell you exactly what is going on in the walls, what's going on in the ceilings, what's going on in the floor systems. I can't do that yet on the Woofy systems. I can't understand what it is to make sure that the modeling software matches the drawings, which is going to match what is being inspected or installed in the field. So I think that is more the challenge that I see when looking at this software is how can we make sure, one, we didn't make any errors in the modeling, which, you know, as part of our review, we're trying to do a double check. That may not be something that we're skilled enough to be able to do on this software. It might be too complicated. But two, does it match the drawings? Does it match what we're going to be seeing in the field? On Greg Fisher's house that he just built, I believe that's correct. We had to use some smart air barriers on the inside, Majorex, if I remember right, out of Germany. So you're using membrane systems that we haven't seen before. You're not necessarily accounting for the removal of moisture the way code would require it. It's all specific to this passive home design. And if we can't understand that entire package, we don't understand how to provide you the inspections on site to make sure that everything's being done correctly.
Very well said, Alan. I appreciate that feedback a lot. And I think that really chimes home to us too, because we both want the same things. And so I understand that maybe on the inspection side of stuff and what we call alignment, what is modeled, what's actually installed, who inspects that. And if it's not certified, if you have a certified building, then both institutes have a rater that is specifically has an accolade to do that inspection. But if it's not certified, you're right. That lands sort of on the county, and we're comfortable with that and comfortable working with county to make sure, because at the end of the day, we don't want any toilet that doesn't flush correctly, let's say. Okay, so moving on, is there any specific questions that come up? I know there's one outstanding issue, which is providing some sort of a guideline checklist that maybe different counties can have to sort of standardize this. And as Juan mentioned, we do have a copy of a Manual J that kind of shows what they're looking for, and we'll be happy to present that checklist as a synopsis or summary of this meeting. Are there any specific questions or any topics that people would like to talk about? And you can certainly raise your hand if you have something to say. And I know Greg Project is familiar with everybody. Greg, if you did have any input for the team or just maybe what your experience was, I'm sure we would like to hear it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share. First of all, appreciate this conversation. It's very helpful to have everybody working together towards solving these issues. My project was processed through Larimer County, and all the folks at Larimer County were very helpful in facilitating that. Eric, Alan, and others. And so I won't say it went 100% smoothly, but everybody was working towards trying to solve the problems. We ended up doing. We submitted the PHPP calculations, and we kind of tried to highlight the key pages for the building department, but ultimately it was still too cumbersome. And so we ended up submitting a res check in addition to the PHPP calculations, and the project was approved that way. But as you're all aware, the res check calculations, just really don't properly accommodate the situation at all. They don't even acknowledge, insulation underneath floor slab, and we had R32 underneath the slab, just as an example. But anyway, the county was very helpful in working through that. We did get through that. Enrico provided a lot of additional information to help with that. And then, as Alan mentioned, we had one specific situation relative to some unvetted attic conditions where we used Myrex intelligent vapor barrier and a lot of analysis by Enrico to walk everybody through that. And so ultimately we got there, but hopefully there's an easier way down the road with a checklist to be able to facilitate things. The one thing I would say that maybe outside the scope of this meeting today, but that I think needs to be addressed down the road too, is just inspections. And the passive house scenarios oftentimes take inspections entirely out of the normal sequence. So for example, in our case, we have a double wall with an interior air barrier and then a service cavity that's insulated inboard of that. And so, we had to get a framing inspection before the insulation inspection and before we could fully finish the framing even. So because we were going to start covering it up with this intelligent air and vapor barrier. And then we also had to get more than one insulation inspection because, you insulated in the outside double walls, and then we put the air and vapor control layer in, and then we insulated inside of that. So again, the county was very cooperative in working through that, but it just didn't work within the system. If you try to sign up for an inspection online, you're calling for an insulation inspection, it already shows that you checked that off previously, et cetera. So they're just, we need to start working towards that in some fashion as well.
Well said. Well said. Is there anybody else that has submitted PHPP or WFI passive that has kind of got hung up? I know we've got a lot of audience members. I don't see a lot of questions. We're at about minute 45, so we can start wrapping the dialogue. The main takeaway would be a kind of a standardized checklist that Enrico and Lisa and myself can work and distribute it. We have all the emails on this list. We'll hold those confidential. This is more like a science body of collective minds together working to make building better and healthier and more comfortable. Does anyone have any specific comments they would like before we sign off?
Yeah.
Kyle, I've got you over there. Let's go ahead and let Kyle go ahead. Hi, Kyle.
Hey guys, my name's Kyle Meyer. I'm with Black Timber Builders. I think my comment is especially for we're working with the county right now on a development we're doing that has several passive homes. So we're very interested in helping with if there's an extra worksheet or something we need to put together, or if there's some type of summary page that we can create a template that maybe all of us can use. We're happy to help develop that. Maybe Enrico's doing design for us, so Enrico could help as well. So we also we have another project that's going to come through Rich and Brad in the city coming up soon, and we're hoping to take that one passive as well. And that'll be on a multifamily scale, so a little bit different than our single family homes coming through the county right now. But if something could be put together, and again, we're happy to do legwork from our company. Our team can help. So that's just an open offer. But something that could apply to a lot of different types of projects. So yeah, we can standardize a lot of this together. And everybody who has to come out and do inspections and review, I totally understand efficiencies there. So we all want that as well. So feel free, anybody, to reach out to me or anyone from our team, and we will hop right in and help come to a solution.
Thank you for that, Kyle. I think you hit on a hot spot, because in a way it's almost like I'm thinking that passive house specific might have a fast track, because it could save inspectors some time too, knowing that we're kind of in a way leapfrogging a lot of the code standard things. Not all of them. I mean, there's certainly plenty of benefit to having the review, but it might save in other time. And as a builder, as many costs as we can cut out of that redundancy, that ultimately makes it easier for buildings, and the affordability cause is definitely at play here. Thanks.
Yeah, even for us too. I mean, if there's, inspections got a little funny this year, right? For all of us, video inspections, setting times, and there were some efficiencies from our side that we saw on that, where it's, I don't have to place somebody waiting on an inspection for half a day or a full day, not knowing timing. A video inspection comes through. We are picking timing. It was organized from our perspective. A lot of that was easier. I know there were probably challenges, and there's nothing that can, recreate putting an inspector's eyes and feel out in the field. But third-party inspections, video inspections, anything like that, when we're cooking along and trying to move quickly, if I have to pay a little bit for third-party inspections, somebody that's improved, I'll do it, to keep us going. And that probably helps you guys as well. It's kind of going back to, foundations being inspected by our engineers. And I don't know how many people still have municipalities do those, but pretty much across the board, our engineers inspect everything they can now, So that's a further conversation, but from our perspective, we're open, to make it easy on everybody.
Okay, we found our guinea pig. Thank you for that.
If I can add a couple of notes, I think this is a great conversation. I appreciate this happening. With regards to the summary page and what Greg was describing, what we submitted, that was probably a couple of years ago. So since that, we have developed a couple of page summary listing not only R values, but also passive solar gains of windows, expected ACH value, ventilation rate, and if there's an ERV or HRV, which is always the case in passive house, what's the expected heat recovery rate and moisture recovery rate. So that is something that, in looking forward to bringing this to a standardized point, I think I can share that just to see what I have provided, not only permit offices, but also sometimes we work with somebody else that is doing the manual J. So that is the kind of information they need to fill in. And so that is something that will be a starting point. Now, with regards to inspection and verification of what the model is, I would like to draw a distinction between buildings that are going for third-party certification versus buildings that are just implementing passive house in a more loose term. And we try to promote certification because it provides the extra competent set of eyes on the project. Because, you know, in getting closer to zero, some mistakes can be detrimental. So in setting this up, I think we should consider differently buildings that are going for certification with PHI and or FEOS versus buildings that are not, because that really provides a different quality assurance process.
And one certification route would save counties some time versus not pursuing certification requiring that third party, which both institutes require, would cause probably more inspections where the county officials are probably looking at us to help them. And we're happy to help because like you alluded to, Enrico, any passive house building that fails is kind of a team failure. So we all want them all to be as good as they can be. And unfortunately, not all the buildings can be passive house. And it's kind of like training for the Olympics. That you might have mainstream will do 12 to 15 in a given year, and maybe 4 to 5 can turn the building, don't want the large windows, and it trickles on. But all of those should have this core passive house science. And I think that's what Enrico alludes to there is you have a wall leak somewhere and you have a huge problem. Is there anybody else in the audience there? Schwartz, how you doing?
Well, thank you. And thanks everybody for joining the call. I think it's been really informative. I wanted to go back to, I guess, Greg Fisher's comment that he went to using ResCheck. And two points there. One is that more and more third parties, specifically raters, are becoming certified in the ICC certification process to do plans examining and field inspections. So you can leverage that. And if you also leverage that with the simulated performance path, even the ERI pathway in the code, there's no way that a passive house cannot comply with current codes on all of the installation, and even water management and all of those details. The one thing that you've really pointed out that I think this group should really concentrate on is the manual J part. That is the side that doesn't get transferred. That information doesn't get transferred properly to the code jurisdiction so that they have faith that this low load home will actually perform. It's not the insulation. It's not the water management side. It's the HVAC side. And I think I think you're right on the right track there by figuring out a additional documentation that can point that out, and everything else is really, from my perspective, is covered by the code already.
And one quick, just side note on that is when we had an instance recently with a radiant floor, we needed a radiant J. The radiant J was not reflecting subslab insulation of R30. So you go from an R nothing to an R30, and the radiant J was not giving us the feedback. All the more better when you're going net zero or these super energy efficient or passive house, to really look at the behaviors of their models, where PHPP and Wi-Fi passive will react to these little teeny things where our manual J's would not. And in certain situations, if you have a radiant floor system that's over designed with the boiler, well, it's really bad for the boiler and the overall performance.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
like Greg pointed out, his under slab insulation wasn't reflected on the res check, but it would be reflected in using the simulated performance path or even the ERI pathway. So it's choosing the right pathway and learning and understanding the flexibility that's already within the IECC to make it work. And then adding, I believe adding this other component of how to deal with the manual J.
I think Hope had something to say, if I'm not mistaken, from the chat.
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
One of the things that I just wanted to mention is right now you have a few code officials on here. You know, you have one from, Fort Collins and Loveland and Larimer County and Parker. And this information, should be, provided on a more large scale, because this type of construction is getting utilized in more than just those particular locations. So I was going to offer to permit you to put together maybe a short article that I can put into the Colorado chapter's newsletter that will provide some guidance for these, jurisdictions that are starting to look at these to give them, one, a better understanding of what a passive house is, what's involved with it, and maybe how they have to, alter their, plan review or inspection process for these types of homes. But I just wanted to throw that out there and give you the opportunity that if you wanted to put, something small together, I'm more than happy to get that published for you.
That sounds great. I'll volunteer Mainstream and EMU to get that to collaborate there. Hope, thanks a bunch. I appreciate that. That's exactly a team approach. We love it. Can I take any other questions or commentary? This session is being recorded. Mike, let me unmute you and thank you. And there we go. Thanks, Mike.
Hi there. I'm bringing myself up to speed on a lot of this, as I'm ignorant to some of it, but learning as we go. And maybe someone can help me understand. My understanding, the calculations that are performed are based more on total envelope versus a room-to-room analysis in general. Is that correct? So we attack the manual J and the S side of it, but we still have the D side of it. And if we're looking at it from an overall building shell standpoint, the question I have obviously is room-to-room comfort in the D side of it, which is a function of understanding the sensible loss and gain per room. That's how I size ductwork. That's how I design my flow rates to rooms. And I guess not to muddy the waters by any means, but I'd want to make sure that I understand how that's going to be addressed from the code perspective. And I'm also the one that has to satisfy the consumer in the field from a comfort perspective. So, and this is a conversation I can have with Enrico and different people later on the design aspect of it, but it's definitely kind of in my mind, obviously providing comfort for folks.
Lisa or Enrico, either one of you have some feedback on that?
I would say that it's very typical to kind of go with some other heating systems like the mini splits, for example, or the heat pumps in general. And the forced air ducting systems are less used in a lot of our envelope shells. I don't know, Enrico, if that's very similar for you.
Yeah, I've also done, back in the day in Europe, I've done the equivalent of manual J calculation and PHPP alongside, and I was the designer of the HVAC system there. I think no system is perfect. I think we can come up with a way to kind of distribute the whole building load resulting from WUFI and PHPP room by room with some templatized spreadsheet that we can work on. Overall, these are buildings that are very insulated, and so typically you don't have as much differences between different parts of the rooms. But I definitely understand Mike's concern and wanted to satisfy the consumer. So I think this is definitely something we can work on together.
I think that's something that we have to come meeting mind on, because on one side, a passive house can have one little 34,000 BTU fireplace in the center, and all the rooms, because there's no losses, all the rooms are still very comfortable. Whereas the point of local code officials making sure comfort is in every room, it comes from a factor of making sure there's no freezing in those rooms. And that dovetails back to the accuracy of our model. Is if we're building a 2x6 wall, then absolutely we wouldn't want to see that on our desk with PHPP or Woofy Passive. We would want to see that there's no thermal bridges. And at that point, looking at that whole load. And then what's interesting is, of course, as soon as the installer comes involved, they're going to have their own calculations to reflect. So how we align with those, Mike, is spot on. I think that was Achilles right there at the last minute.
Also, the software does have the ability to break the building into different zones. And so I use that feature a lot, even for the mini splits.
And I did notice there are some softwares out there. SketchUp, as a matter of fact, looks like they're beta testing a passive house modeling, room-to-room modeling, which whether it's effective or not, who knows. But I would imagine the code officials are probably looking at that as well, being that ACA Manual D is part of the code requirements, SD and J. And it sounds like, obviously the code officials and the plans examiners are looking for a means of compliance per what the code says. And at some point, I just want to make sure if I'm involved in this, that I'm also submitting to them what we need to be compliant.
And I think that point is really where the science side, Greg mentioned it, and then we had a building in Montrose. And so if we submit the Radiant J to you for review, Mike, and then you say, well, this Radiant J says you need 20,000 more BTU per hour than what your PHPP model, we might have to assume those values are branches or percentages off of what the PHPP model is at that point, versus oversizing a boiler with an inaccurate software. So that's the science. I think that's where our minds meet head on head. And the passive house community at large studies their energy models as the performance. So I'm sure in a year, the Mill House, Greg's house, they'll probably be looking at that and seeing, how is our model, because this is a game for us of accuracy. So we want to be accurate. Anybody else have any closing thoughts? I think this has been a tremendous group. We're definitely past the hour. It's been our pleasure from Mainstream, I know EMU Building Systems, and Larimer County. Thank you very much, as well as Fort Collins, and Weld County was here. So I think some of the best minds probably in the state of Colorado are here, and it may be something that we need to do more often. Hope, I think you had a tremendous offer there. We'll get you some checklists that you can put in your newsletter. And then also at large, a checklist that we can all share to make this easier, faster, and then ultimately less expensive for the builders and the developers. Any final thoughts from anybody?
Yeah, I know we need to go. I think it's been a great dialogue that we should continue, because we only sort of scratched the surface. And I think you guys understand our point of view. It's like, as code officials, we like what you're doing, we trust what you're doing, but now you have to prove it to us, because our job is like, you have to prove it to us so we can make sure it meets code. So that's where we're going with this. I think Rich's idea of having a alternative means and methods makes sense. In fact, Kyle already submitted one, and I kind of put him off until after this meeting. And if you do the alternative means and method, it does set parameters. Within these parameters, you can use the system. So if someone comes in with a 2x6 house and says, hey, I want to use the passive house energy model, and the answer is no, that's not going to work. That's outside the parameters. So I think that's where the next step is to set the guidelines we can all agree on, so we know it'll work and it'll comply, and we're all happy.
Yeah. One thing, thanks, Eric. One more question maybe for Lisa and Enrico. Is there a way to kind of auto-populate metrics in the design software or anything? And, if the code officials had specifics of what they want to see, that's just summarizing, right? Like we've been talking about. there's a way to actually populate that in the software or make some movements there. And then my next question, and this might have been covered, but what does it take to get ACCA approved software? Like, what's the process? How far out would we be where it's not happening, is what I'm guessing from this conversation.
So what is can you repeat the first part of your question about auto-populating?
Yeah, is there a way for you? So when I read a PHPP report, I'm reading a 25-page report, and I don't know how that works, what's linked to what as far as your inputs and then the data it spits out,
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, if it could spit out the data that exactly what the code officials need, if we get those specifics, and it's just a part of the report, and this isn't immediate, but this is longer term. So we're providing everything we need in a singular report without additional inputs of, an Excel spreadsheet we're attaching, which is fine to start, but eventually we'll all want some more efficiencies than that.
So the summary that we put together digs out key values from PHPP, and PHPP being an Excel file is easier to work with than an actual software such as Woofy, but I guess you can do the same with Woofy. Mm-hmm. It really comes down to seeing what the permit officer needs to see and what the inspector needs to see, and put that together in one page. Like we've done that. And that is not the report that you have seen, Kyle. That is, I put you through something that is a little bit more complex. So, but it is definitely like looking at the R values and the wall build up, so that somebody walking on site can actually relate that to a measuring tape and some data sheet from insulation, for example, or a blower test report. So that is fairly simple. The second part of the question is to get something third-party validated. I guess time and money is the problem. Like having that, not only one but two softwares being validated by something like that. I've looked into validating a software for NFRC, for National Fenestration Rating Council, and that was a big bar to pass. So that I don't think that is realistic to have that being in the future. But maybe I'm just trying to say something that we can all meet.
No, I think that probably is the barrier entry of cost is probably just a little bit out of the scope of desires of the institutes, where it's more science-based. So we're challenging it to make it mainstream, I guess, if you will, more accepted. Okay, well, I think we better wrap up on respect of everybody's time. Lisa, did you have something real quick?
No, not real quick. I think we could do some more of these though.
Yeah, we got a geeky group here. Good job, everyone. I really appreciate your time, and thank you very much, every one of you that was here, and we'll send a follow-up. At this point then, you guys have a wonderful weekend, and thanks for your energy.